Welcome to LeaderIQ, where we share the stories of leaders in brand and retail, so you can learn what led them to find success in their careers, while giving you an intimate look at how they made foundational decisions along the way. This show is hosted by Guru Hariharan, who's the founder and CEO of PepsiCo. Guru spent most of his career working as a leader at companies like Amazon and eBay, before becoming an entrepreneur himself. This podcast is brought to you by PepsiCo, a company which Guru started in 2019 that has become the e-commerce operating system for brands like Logitech, Johnson & Johnson, Kellogg's, Mars, Duracell, and many more. If you're interested, check out commerceiq.ai to learn more. With that, let's get to the show. Today's guest is Vince Jones, Senior Vice President and Head of E-commerce at PepsiCo. We dive into his personal story of what it was like growing up in the Midwest and unpack his career journey that started at Accenture, took him through the dot-com boom with a stint at Walmart.com, C-suite roles at eBags and Bluestem brands, taking him to where he is today, leading e-commerce for the iconic company PepsiCo. I'm incredibly excited for you to listen to this interview. Here is Vince Jones and your host, Guru Hariharan.
Welcome, Vince. It's fantastic to have you on the LeaderIQ podcast. This is the first recording we're having in 2022. So I've been very excited to have you on our show. Over the years, we've seen you unravel a lot of things in your career and grow from strength to strength. So I've been personally very excited to host you on this show.
Well, fantastic. Thank you for having me, and very excited to be here and honored to be the first one of 2022. And again, thanks for having me and excited for the conversation. Also wanted to say congratulations to you on all the success and everything that you've built with PepsiCo. And it's been fantastic to see that. And I do have a personal appreciation for everything that goes into that and how difficult that can be. And you're to be commended and congrats.
Thank you so much, Vince. Appreciate your kind words. So in order to just get us rolling, just as a quick roadmap for our audience and to you, we'll sort of do this in three parts, roughly. Part number one would be early life and the values you imbibed. Part two will be how did you achieve the professional success that you did, key decisions, failures, learnings, and things like that. And finally, we'll end with some personal life anecdotes and things like that. So that's going to be our roadmap for today, but why don't we jump in, and would love to just maybe start with asking you about just your early life. Where did you grow up? What was it growing up as a kid? What kind of values got imbibed to you, and things of that nature?
Absolutely. So I actually grew up on a farm, a small family farm in outside of a small town in northeast Oklahoma, so kind of right on the Oklahoma-Arkansas border there. So very much grew up in that, a lot of outdoor activity, small town where you certainly had the values, and I would say kind of Midwest, kind of the Midwest values, and learning about treating people with respect, but also the importance of working hard and having ambitions and believing that through that hard work you can achieve things in different ways that manifests itself from where I grew up. But I think that's certainly the starting point there.
That's great. And how do you juxtapose that, Vince, and sort of when you think about CPG ends up being a kind of a very competitive, sometimes even a dog-eat-dog world, and sort of growing up in sort of a very kind of a Midwesterner type of an upbringing, where you talk about appreciation for the quote unquote finer things. How has that juxtaposition or the journey has been for you?
Yeah, it's been, I would say it's interesting. So first of all, I think, even in, whether you're in a competitive environment or, some of the core values about, sort of the importance of relationships, how you treat people. And I would say, honestly, I look to a lot that I learned probably from my father, who by the way is turning 81 this week. I'm going to fly down and see him on Thursday for his 81st birthday. So very, very excited about that. But he, in addition to, having the small farm, which wasn't really a big financial success. It was more of a hobby farm. He built a business as an insurance agent. And what I learned sort of watching him, and keep in mind this is a small town rural population, the way that he treated people who came into his office or his insurance business that he was helping out, that he treated those people the same regardless of what their background was, where they were from, whether they were from the farthest part out in the country or the quote unquote town. I think treating all those people with respect, but also understanding how he could help them, or how the things that he was offering, he could do that in a way that really would set people up for success. Or, and a lot of times candidly, when people were coming to him is when they needed help because they had had a bad situation happen in their life. So learned a lot about how you treat people, how to build those relationships, and honestly how he built that business. And so then if I think about that, sort of the characteristics of hard work, the characteristics of treating people well, I think you can still be driven to success, whether it's in CPG, whether it's in technology companies. But at the core, you have to think about, in our case, what are we keeping at the center, or in a lot of the retail businesses I've been, you sort of keep the need of that customer or that consumer at the center of what you're trying to do in your business. And then hopefully you have, data around whether it's a decision you're trying to make, whether it's a solution you're trying to build. And then ultimately building the relationships with your coworkers, or whether it's a competitive environment, internally with a different, obviously with a different company, et cetera, that you can make those things, depend on those relationships, and ultimately keeping that customer at the center, get to a good outcome.
I loved how you sort of almost paint this as a orthogonal type of a setting where sort of treating people well, building relationships. It's very orthogonal from the plane of building a great company, building a great business, and succeeding. So I really resonate with that. Maybe then to build on top of that. So you grew up in the Midwest and with these core values, and you then decided to go to the University of Arkansas. Can you talk to us about that journey and how you made that decision?
Sure. It was, so I think a couple of things I would say. One, my dad was the first person, and him and his brother actually were the first people in our family to go to college, and they both went to Oklahoma State University. So I was sort of groomed to go to Oklahoma State by my dad. And at the last minute, I made this decision to abandon what for him had been my lifelong plan to go to Oklahoma State, and I went to the University of Arkansas. And I think even today he's still a little bit bitter about that. But actually, let me tell you one more part of that story. And hopefully not getting too far ahead, but I went to graduate school for business school at Stanford, and I'm not exaggerating. Walked across, get my diploma. The graduation is over. My dad comes up to me and he's like, "Well, son, I'm really proud of you for graduating from Stanford, but don't you think you can just get one degree from Oklahoma State?" And that's so just to give you a sense of how passionate he was about that. And so I appreciate that. But back to the decision for Arkansas. So one, I think, look, these transitions, especially, coming from this sort of small rural background, I've sort of had to push myself, a little bit into several points in my life and in my career out of what I would call a comfort zone. And I think this was sort of the first step there. And it was a good step for me because, it actually was probably the closest large university. If you think about the large state universities in that area, it was about an hour away. But honestly, I went to the campus there, and it's a beautiful setting on the campus. The campus is on a hill. You're kind of in the foothills there, and it's truly a beautiful setting. And I just love the campus. Was fortunate to get a good scholarship there as well, and that was a big part of it. And it was far enough away that I was I wasn't staying at home, but it was pretty quick. I could get back and do some laundry on the weekend if I needed without having to have a big commute. And so sort of those combination of factors, and then obviously enjoyed the programs that were there, and those were the things that led me to make that decision.
And Vince, you also mentioned you got an MBA from the Stanford School of Business, the Graduate School of Business, Stanford. What drove you to get an MBA post after your bachelor's degree? You
bet. So just I'll go through the quick transition there. So after Arkansas, I went and worked at what was then Anderson Consulting, is now Accenture. Did my 3 years there. And I think, right away, and it was a great decision, and I'm really glad I did it. But I figured out pretty quickly that consulting, and I was kind of working in the technology and process area, and so doing some coding, some sort of design, product manager work, we'd probably call that today. But I figured out pretty quickly that wasn't necessarily my strength. I did have a passion for solving problems. I did sort of have a knack for thinking about how can we leverage technology to solve business problems, but that overall consulting path wasn't the right one for me. So as I was thinking about sort of my options and how to pivot my career, I looked at a few different scenarios, and ultimately, sort of doing research, talking to different people, including, partners at the firm that I was at, other folks that I respected for. It really seemed like, business school was a good way to kind of make a career pivot there that also, would help further overall understanding in outside of the areas that I had the experience in, and really give me a chance to sort of to explore new areas, learn new capabilities, and again, push myself outside of my comfort zone a little bit. So that's how I decided to go to business school.
Got it. I see a sort of a common thread in terms of just curiosity. It looks like you wanted to sort of go in and explore areas that you felt that you were missing, or perhaps wanted to develop more further along as you started to unravel those business models at Anderson Consulting.
Yeah, absolutely. I would say, whether, I definitely, have, and continue to try to be curious, to both learn more, but also to just explore and, understand, parts of business that I don't understand, business challenges, or, in some cases, technology solutions that maybe I don't understand. And so I've certainly always had a curiosity and a, a willingness and desire to sort of push myself in different areas and sort of see what I can accomplish, and hopefully not push myself too far that I tip over. But certainly that's always been something that has been a part of what I've tried to do.
That's great, Vince. Yeah, I think even as I'm starting to sort of bring up my son, we've got a one and only 11-year-old, and it's often like when having brought up in a very traditional Asian type of family where there was always things were not good enough. Like you always had to get to the the best school and this and that, and always 99 wasn't enough, and had to have 100 and stuff like that. I started to really appreciate the elements of being able to learn and being curious. It's way more important than what I believe, at least in the next generation that's coming up, than actually having a stamp of a good school. So having been to a great school and now sort of watching the next generation grow, do you have any thoughts on what is important as we look to the next generation for them to be successful?
Yeah, I think so. I want to come back on a couple of things that you said there, and maybe talk a little bit again about sort of my earlier life. It was interesting there because I actually, maybe I just inherited it, but I actually was sort of naturally competitive, which generally has been a good thing, but not always was a good thing. And over time, I've learned how to harness that or tone that down a little bit. But I actually, I don't know to what extent, this was right or wrong, but I actually didn't face a lot of academic pressure growing up from my dad. He was absolutely supportive and like a big cheerleader, but I didn't feel a lot of pressure. But somehow, maybe that helped me develop through some amount of my own competitiveness, this ability and comfort with sort of pushing myself and seeing what is out there that I could accomplish. What is it that I haven't understood in terms of thinking about really, next generation, the things that are important. I mean, one, on my first day of work, actually, I remember this at Anderson Consulting, they bring you in a start group of 10. One of the senior folks come in and, was giving us sort of the opening day speech and said, hey, let me tell you, the first thing my first piece of advice for you, if you want to have a successful career here, is learn how to be flexible. And he's like, you don't know what's going to happen. You don't know what's around the next corner, but learn, how to be flexible, how to think about embracing change, how to think about what you can do to learn from that. And I would say certainly today, I think that's absolutely essential as you think about how you're patterning your career. Flexibility, whether it's in how you think about solving problems, whether it's you think about a pivot to this career or this industry, I think that's a key thing that is, I would certainly encourage everyone. Another thing I would, a couple of other things I would say is, I've always placed big emphasis on execution in whatever role I was in. Execution, ability to deliver, ability to, focus on outcomes and actually achieve those and bring people along. I would say earlier in my career, I probably was maybe focus on execution at the extent, or excuse me, in a way that may sort of leave charred earth or have some damaged relationships behind. I've tried to mature out of that over time and try to do it in a more collaborative way, but still, I think really that ability to deliver and focus is something that's critical and really helps you to become indispensable, if you will, whether it's to your team, whether it's to your manager or supervisor, to your company. And I think that's something that's really important.
That's great, Vince. I think just to sort of paraphrase, I think, and I wholeheartedly agree that the a level of competitiveness or paranoia is crucial, is important. In this day and age, learning how to be flexible is so important, especially in the e-commerce realm that we operate. No single day is exactly the same as yesterday, and it's changing every single day. So the flexibility trait is so important. And finally, being really good at execution. I think those are really very practical advice to for the next generation. This is great. Now, Vince, you talked about, you used the word explore, and I'm curious, these are the explorations that look like it worked. Were there any explorations that did not work for you in the early days and which ended up being good in that, like you didn't go down that path, but you got a chance to explore it early on?
So, I don't know how far I get to qualify as exploring, but I will tell you, when I took the job at Anderson early on, I actually was planning to go down the path of going to law school, and had started studying LSAT and application process, and really sort of came across the Anderson opportunity when some alumni came into some of our classes in the school there, and they were on campus recruiting, and they were sort of pitching the idea. And so I think that was a case where certainly I was I had set myself up for this path of I'm going to go to law school and become an attorney. And really it pivoted pretty quickly once I went through that interview process and really learned about the opportunity that was there and the challenges that were there. And I think that really has helped set me on a good path there. And so I certainly would say that, that's one. I think different, maybe at different points you try different projects, you build different things, some work better than others. I think I've been fortunate, from an overall career perspective, I can say that as I look at all the different stops in my career that I felt like I've gained, great experience and learned a lot and had good success all along the way. And so I don't know that I have any specific decisions that I would have made differently there, but I certainly think there's a couple of times where I've had the opportunity to do something that I didn't and maybe pass that up and then found my way to what was ultimately the right thing.
And was it mostly through gut that you sort of dipped your feet, especially for instance, going back to that law school decision that you made? Looks like you came in with some confirmative bias that you wanted to go there, but then you dipped your feet and the gut feel check didn't feel right? Yeah,
I would say it's a combination. So I would like to say it's a combination of, data to some extent, or analytics combined with sort of that gut or that intuition. And so, in each of the cases, it may have been, there may have been some factors that were like, hey, this is what I feel, or this is where my heart or my gut is leading me. But also, in the case of the Anderson example, I think understanding sort of career paths that were there, although I didn't ultimately, end up staying through like all the ranks of a partner, but looking at the opportunities of, okay, if you come here and you do this, this for 2 years, you're eligible for the first promotion, and then 5 years, the next promotion. And if you're there for whatever 12 years, you have a chance to be a partner and have whatever the big dollars were that were associated with that at that time. And so I think there was sort of some analytics around that. Actually looks like a pretty good scenario, combined a little bit with the gut. And I would say throughout, I would like to think that sort of that combination of some data, some intuition would be how I make decisions.
That's great. Once coming to your career, then after your B school, you ended up at Walmart. And what was it like working at a traditional retailer during, especially the first .com boom that we were having at that time?
Yeah, it was very interesting. So I guess first a little bit of background, and I didn't mention this earlier, but I actually worked in Walmart stores when I was in high school. So I mentioned I grew up in Oklahoma. I went to the University of Arkansas. So where I grew up was less than an hour from Bentonville, which is obviously the headquarters of Walmart. University of Arkansas, obviously, Fayetteville is like 20 minutes from Bentonville. So I had experience, and I worked there for about 3.5 years in the stores. And so also, Walmart is a company that I'd followed growing up, and being that close was such an amazing success story and something that had always been interesting to me. So as I was coming out of business school and really trying to determine what to do. And I actually had done a summer internship with Texas Instruments. I didn't mention this, but when I was doing consulting, I was based in Dallas with Anderson, and then I was out in the Bay Area and had done an internship with Texas Instruments. Had an offer to come back there as a part of their financial leadership program, and really at that point, we obviously were. This was before the crash of the early .com business in 2000, 2001. All of the excitement, enthusiasm around e-commerce was something that was really interesting, that I'd learned a lot about while I was there at Stanford for a couple of years. And so Walmart.com presented this opportunity to sort of participate in that in a way that I felt like risk adjusted was pretty good. And I don't know if you know this, but at that point in time, Walmart.com was actually a separate company. They had carved it off. They had partnered with Excel, the venture capital firm, and it literally was a separate company. Walmart, obviously, a significant shareholder, seats on the board, et cetera, but we were an independent company that was, an IPO track company. And so I think making that decision was about this sort of risk-adjusted approach of, hey, a chance to be in this really exciting space and something that's really interesting. Also a chance to be in there really early. I was really on the ground floor of that early team. But then, sort of if things didn't work out, hey, Walmart is a great company that I know and have a lot of respect for. And so if that, if the e-commerce thing doesn't actually pan out, it's not too bad of a fallback option to be a part of Walmart. And so that was sort of the decision-making process there. In terms of, what it was like to be at, there, it was obviously very early on at that point. I think, look, I'll be honest, there was, I think there was a tremendous amount of skepticism about the business model, the viability of e-commerce. Walmart was obviously a huge and successful company, and so I think we had to overcome a lot of that. And obviously, it's taken e-commerce a long time to ultimately achieve the potential that we all saw at the time, and have been a few and a couple of times 2 steps forward, 1 step back. But I think it was also at the same time really exciting to be sort of a part of this small group that was helping innovate within the large company and help really take this more cutting edge approach. And we had a really strong team there. And so it was really exciting in that regard. I think challenging in that we had to sort of deal with a little bit of evangelism internally, understanding why, what the resources were that were needed, all those sorts of things. And honestly, doing things that were just very different than what the company had done for many years and was highly successful, obviously. And so I think that was an interesting part of it as well. But overall, it was a fantastic experience to be able to build that early part of that e-commerce business, and was there ultimately for about 5.5 years. And it was very exciting.
Vince, also that really intrigued me. So why do you think Walmart.com was treated or launched as a separate company? Was there some thought process behind and some advantages that you saw in having that being the case to do it? Yeah,
at the time. So I wanted to be clear, I wasn't really involved in that decision. I came in after that was done. But sort of the thought was a few things. One, the ability to attract technical talent is really kind of a big part of why why it was split out as a separate company, why they partnered with a venture capital firm like Excel, why it was headquartered in the Bay Area, not in Bentonville. And I think really that, I think it was viewed as there was this need to really attract a different type of talent in the marketplace that may have been difficult at that time to do in Bentonville. And so I think that was a part of it. And then I think there were some other things about splitting it off in terms of, enabling speed, enabling investment. And I think there also was, some thought that, hey, look at the valuation that these e-commerce companies are getting. This could actually be a great, if this thing does ultimately, build up and go public, it could be a great cash flow move for the company. And so I think those were kind of all the factors that went into that.
It's also interesting if you look back. I think Nordstrom.com also was kind of formed in that same manner, separate company. I think it was funded by Madrona, if I'm not mistaken, up in Seattle. Yep. And then they merged it back. And a few examples around like the Home Depot. It wasn't a separate company, but it was kind of run in a very different organization. They incubated it, brought it up. And some of these decisions, as I understand, was around the fact that, look, this is a future. This is the future. We need to, this is a must-win battlefront. We cannot afford to lose this battlefront. However, if I keep it within the four walls of the existing business, then the next dollar of investment is always going to go to the more profitable one, not the one that needs a lot more investment on a long term. And I think it's kind of like very interesting and very, frankly, very visionary to sort of keep that, and that too, we're dating ourselves like 2000 to sort of incubate it in such a big way and in such a different and unique way.
Yeah, absolutely. No, I think I do agree that I think it was definitely viewed as very strategic and I think it was really interesting and just to finish that part of the story, it was ultimately purchased back and is now a wholly owned subsidiary since they purchased it back in, I think it was summer 2001 after sort of the crash, and it's operated as a wholly owned subsidiary since then. I obviously left there in 2005, so I've been gone for a long time, but it was a fantastic part of the journey, and I learned a lot. And it was certainly, for me, exciting to be a part of something that scaled the way that did. And, we were in this situation where the business is growing rapidly, doubling year over year. Also, our sales at that point were very compressed between toys and electronics, and we would literally do 50% of our business in 6 weeks, which, as you can imagine, you're doubling year over year, doing 50% of your business in 6 weeks, created some amazing opportunities, but also some amazing challenges to manage through. So learned a lot, and it was just a fantastic experience for me.
That's great. Looks like it's looking back at your career, you've been involved with e-commerce and especially with Walmart.com like since day one almost. So this is amazing. How about like forward a couple of years now, and you're at SugarSync. What do you think gave the CEO the confidence to actually put you and have you as a part of their leadership team there? Yeah,
so I really think, and I guess I'll tie this back a little bit to the work that we did at Walmart.com. So that was a case where I was a part of a very small team. I would say 10, probably in the first 10 folks there. And then at the time I had left, I had built, sort of a lot of the operations infrastructure, the team, a supply chain network, and a lot of the technology corresponding to that we needed to operate that business. So we had really scaled that up and built this infrastructure that scaled to be ultimately, support multi-billion-dollar business there with Walmart.com. And so I think, seeing how I'd been able to, take something that was, started out smaller. To be clear, we had the advantage of the brand of Walmart, but from an infrastructure and operations perspective and technology perspective, how we'd been able to, really build a lot of these things from scratch in partnership with the technology teams, obviously, but build something from scratch that, dealt with a very challenging environment, which I talked to you about the way the supply chain had to scale, but also, scaled from a technology perspective, from an operation perspective, but also from a team perspective. And I think it was really that ability to grow something and how I'd been able to be a key part of something that was small, that grew rapidly, and had been, sort of able to adjust to that and scale with that and help build, a key component of that scale. And so I think that was one of the big things that probably gave them confidence or certainly was exciting about my background from that point in time.
And how did the CEO opportunity for eBags come along after that?
So we did I will tell you, we did the startup. So I was at SugarSync for about 3.5 years. In that period, when I was at SugarSync, I was where I actually met my wife, had my first daughter. We're living in the Bay Area. So I was in the Bay Area from basically 98 to 2009. And I think once our daughter was born, we started having some personal decisions about what was important for us as a family. Let's be honest, cost of living decisions and those sorts of things. Working at a startup in the Bay Area with a newborn, there are some challenges there. And so we ultimately made the decision that we wanted to leave the Bay Area, and so we explored a few different places, sort of all the typical things that you would expect. We went to Denver in, I guess it would have been summer of 2008, and just fell in love with the area. Loved access to outdoor activities, loved the climate, the people. I mean, it was just a great place, and so really just decided that we wanted to make that move to Denver. And I started a job search, and so started networking with people, getting introductions to people that were in Denver through people in the Bay Area, and just sort of started putting out the feelers. And ultimately, in some ways, through the diligence of the network, but also it sort of felt like by luck, a recruiter call came in to one of the folks that I'd had contact with and said, "Hey, we have an e-commerce job. Do you know anyone that's looking for an exciting e-commerce job? And by the way, it happens to be in Denver." And that person literally said, "Actually, I just talked to a guy." And so they made the connection, obviously went through the interview process and met the team, learned all about the business. And sort of that was how that transition to moving the family to Denver, taking the role at eBags came about.
That's great. And you eventually then land up at PepsiCo after a stint at Bluestem Brands.
Yes.
I'm curious, what got you excited to join a significantly larger company in PepsiCo versus staying in a C-suite of a company that was of the size of Bluestem?
Yeah, so look, there are clearly some trade-offs. Bluestem was just over a $2 billion company at that time. I think things that were great about that, had the ability to, if we knew what we wanted to accomplish, to garner the resources, rally the team, and we could go accomplish that. It obviously is a little bit more complicated in a larger environment like PepsiCo. But when I looked at PepsiCo, I think there were a few things that were really interesting to me. One, as you mentioned, I've been doing e-commerce since basically 2000. And so this was an area that's really interesting to me and really exciting. Two, back to your point about, how Walmart.com, Walmart made that decision, to, separate Walmart.com in a way that they could dedicate investment and not have everything, every incremental dollar of investment go to the big company. PepsiCo actually did something very similar when they set up our e-commerce group about 6 years ago at this point. And so PepsiCo really set up the e-commerce group with the understanding that e-commerce was going to be important, even though it hadn't quite hit that tipping point yet, and really set us up almost as a startup within PepsiCo, startup with training wheels, obviously, a really unique culture, ability to operate at speed and really do a lot of things to innovate in the space. And so it was sort of this combination of, e-commerce, which is what I was passionate about, PepsiCo, obviously an iconic company with many iconic brands that I had always had tremendous respect for. And then the environment of this sort of startup type environment within the big company that really felt like some place that we had autonomy. And then the last thing I would say, having seen e-commerce disrupt many categories over the years, we hadn't at this point, this is about 4.5 years ago, we hadn't quite hit that tipping point in food and beverage. And so being able to be a part of, bringing that e-commerce expertise to this group and actually be a part of the company before that disruption is happening, and building all the things that we needed to do to be prepared for that, were all things that were really exciting for me. And so that's really what led me to PepsiCo. And
has it played out with respect to what your expectations were?
Yeah, I think it's been fantastic. I think our business has grown dramatically. We clearly have hit that tipping point with over the last 2 years. And so while our business was growing rapidly, it's even accelerated over the last couple of years. I think we are clearly seeing now, as consumers have adopted e-commerce for food and beverage, the value of convenience, which again, we've seen with other categories, but now people really experiencing that in a big way in the food and beverage category, that clearly is resonating with that consumer, and that's going to be a really sticky proposition. And so it's been exciting. And I do give PepsiCo credit for making the investments ahead of the curve in the team and our ability to build the capabilities. And when that tipping point occurred, we were actually able to take advantage of it. So it's been very exciting.
And how, where do you think are we in that adoption curve as a consumer in sort of going, especially in this market of food and beverages, in terms of e-commerce adoption? Are they still early, or is it starting to hit like the mid stage and the majority?
I would say it's still early, but it's definitely, we definitely hit that tipping point during the COVID period. But I think it's still early. And look, what you're seeing with a lot of the consumer models or the e-commerce models and how they're meeting the consumer need, the retailers, really leveraging that brick and mortar local inventory to sort of solve some of the last mile cost. And I think that experience and being able to create that experience for the consumer is something that's really resonating with people. And so whether it's order online, the BOPUS model, obviously buy online, pick up in store, or delivery from a local store, we're really seeing a lot of value of those. And then the other thing we're seeing now is, depending on which market you're in, some people call it e-convenience, some people call it rapid delivery, but obviously, with the consumer having the taste of convenience, wanting to go shorter and shorter and shorter delivery times. And so now seeing 30 minutes, 15 minutes offerings out there for consumers. So I think we'll continue to see more adoption. I think we're still in a relatively early point of adoption, but I think it's still a very exciting place to be.
So to pinpoint your point of view, if I'm not mistaken, is sort of look the supply chain, the last mile delivery and the last mile pickup, essentially supply chain coming to bearing, and that has been a big needle mover when it comes to moving the food and beverages adoption curve into the mainstream behavior for consumers.
So I think it's been a big part of it. I mean, so don't get me wrong, what we would call the pure play business, which is you're ordering from your pure play website, shipping, via UPS or FedEx, still a very significant and rapidly growing piece of the business. But I think as you think about, in particular in the food and beverage categories, whether you're shipping, in our case, liquids or salty snacks and chips. I think you think about, the ease of a delivery from a local store or a pickup from a local store versus those items making the transit through through carriers. I think you see some adoption benefits from the consumers there, and that sort of expectation was 2-day with the localized inventory. You can get it same day or next day, and I think that's probably more than anything. It's just that speed is what I would say is important for the consumer.
Got it. No, I resonate with that a lot, and especially with and that's a lot of food companies have started to come up in intermediate retail and sort of launching the Dash Marts of the world on DoorDash or Uber Eats conveniences and things like that. We're also seeing a lot of these also being intermediate even in developing countries like Swiggy in India has launched a similar type of an approach and stuff, starting to disrupt a lot of the models, even the traditional models around Amazon. Like, can't believe that we're actually calling Amazon a traditional model right now.
No, I'm totally with you. The number of times when I find myself saying traditional e-commerce, how did this happen? First of all, that must mean that I'm getting older, but
it's crazy. It's awesome. It's a good adoption curve we're living in. So looking forward then, what is like on that note then, apart from supply chain, and I do fundamentally believe supply chain is going to be a huge disruptor and is going to decide the winner versus the losers to a very large extent, whether it be retail or even consumer brands. But what are your predictions in terms of e-commerce and retail over the next decade?
Well, I certainly think we'll see continued adoption in our categories. I think the question, some things that we spend time thinking about, some of the, social commerce aspects that you see, certainly in China, we see a significant part of the business being done there. How adoption for those type of things might happen in the US. And those are trends that we're keeping a close eye on. That said, I think in the near term, a lot of the work that you're going to see the retailers do are improving the experience, because I feel like so much of this adoption happens so rapidly that we find that, us working with retailers, figuring out the right way, the optimal way to deliver that experience to consumers. I think you're going to see a lot of effort there going into the overall experience, whether it's, driven by changes in supply chain, whether it's driven by, changes in the experience of, how you think about what, used to be how decisions were made going through the physical store. Now you may see 20 to 30% of those decisions being made online, all the implications to those shopping experiences. And I think you'll see a lot of evolution in those areas.
Got it. And on a different note, we're also very curious about any advice that you have on aspiring executives, who are probably in the middle of their careers. What, in other words, what are the key traits that you would look for in individuals within your organization when you say, well, that person has what it takes and is up for the next step up in the career or promotion, and has sort of that high potential in your organization?
Yeah, I think, and I hit on some of these earlier, but I think, one, I would say, we talked about the importance of sort of overall curiosity, intellectual curiosity to explore more. And in this case, I would say, think about whether you're on a specific project, whether you're working in a specific function. I think thinking about, the willingness to raise your hand and say, hey, this may not exactly be in my area, but I've got an idea that I think can make something better over here. And I want to go, bring that forward and maybe ask for some resources to go test this, or find a skunkworks way to do that myself, to even go test some of this. And I think, those types of things are I think really critical. I also talked about, the importance around, thinking about, how to make yourself, invaluable, if you will, to an organization. And certainly part of that, is having confidence that you will deliver, whether it's a project, whether it's a business outcome, whatever the case might be. And I think that's certainly critical. I think another thing, and this is probably more important now than ever, is demonstration of resilience. And I think this is something that we talk a lot, honestly, to our team about, and that I'll be honest, I am, amazed every day at the resilience of our team, our e-commerce team at PepsiCo, and what we've all been able to work through. And I know that that's not specific to us, and that we're all working through that. But I think that's critical as well. And then another thing I would say is the ability to, for us and our business in particular, people who can think about, they approach a business problem and they think about how they can leverage technology, how they can leverage data to solve that problem, maybe in a way that hasn't been solved before, or to build something that didn't exist to make it more efficient or a unique solution. I think really that ability to sort of translate business problems, think about, uses of technology, data, working with those teams, obviously, to deliver that. And those are things that are all critical. And then I'll just say one last thing is, probably more important than ever right now is, being able to lead with empathy is something that I think is absolutely critical, given everything that's going on and what all of us have gone through, what our teams have gone through. I think, having that genuine connection and that empathy for teams and what people are going through in their individual lives is absolutely critical.
Can you maybe click on that one more time? Maybe a little bit color on the empathy aspect of it. I think all the others made a lot of sense. And I'm very curious about what you think about empathy, and are there things that you've seen in and around you where this was demonstrated, which you felt, wow, this was really awesome?
Yeah, I think, so one, I think from the perspective of leaders, I think there's a seeing and feeling a genuine concern about the well-being of the people on their team, their peers, the people on our overall team at large. And then with, that, I think coming across in that genuine and authentic way, I think is really important for people, because look, we're not able to, as you said earlier, I think let's, think about if you're sitting around having, a cup of coffee or something like that, we aren't having those interactions. And so it's much, much more difficult. And then also, just knowing, what people are going through, or not knowing what people are going through, but understanding that, whether it's, childcare issues, whether it's caring for a parent, whether it's, stress that you may not even know that people are dealing with, this ability for strong leaders, for strong managers to understand that, and in a genuine way, put in place, whether it is, specific rules for, hey, make sure that you take certain times off, or make sure that we all have time that we could connect, or let's try to, as a team, take Friday off half a day once a month, whatever that is, but also just, asking the questions and understanding what's going on with folks on your team, and what, what's happening in their life, and then how you can hopefully be helpful with that. And I think those are all things that we have really tried to emphasize and make sure that we create an environment on our team that people know that, they can, that they are genuinely cared about, that they are valued for what they're contributing, and that we're kind of all in this thing together, trying to do the best that we can.
I think that empathy piece is definitely being stress tested, and such a great time, and really timely to bring that up. One of the books that I ended up reading over the holidays was this around Radical Candor by Kim Scott, how she sort of talks about kind of pushing on two dimensions. Dimension number one is personal care. As a manager, can you actually really deeply, personally, truly care for your people? And once you nail that dimension, then sort of bringing this concept of radical candor. And these days, when you don't have the time and the opportunity to have those water cooler conversations, feedback ends up being a lot more direct, and it's so important to actually win the right to be able to give that feedback through personal care. Really resonated with that, so thanks for sharing that. On the personal side, Vince, are there things that you're looking for? Anything left on your bucket list as hopefully the world starts to open up in this year?
Well, certainly I would say, so I have an 11-year-old son, a 14-year-old daughter. All of a sudden, you look up and, we've been sort of almost not entirely locked down, but, you think about family experiences, the ability to take trips. I think my daughter, who just turned 14 in particular, is like, hey, I really want to take a family trip. And I live in Minnesota, and it's probably 5 degrees outside right now. And of course, her perspective was, I don't care where, but I want to go somewhere tropical for our very first trip. And so I think those type of experiences, are things that I certainly look forward to on a personal level. I mentioned going to see my dad. I haven't been able to see him nearly as much as I would have liked, obviously. And so I think, and I haven't in particular been able to have the family make the trip down there to see him. And so I think those types of things as well. So I think a lot of family experiences, on the professional side, honestly, being back with the team, being able to see people in person, have some of those discussions, have some of those positive interactions and feel the energy. I mean, we're in a very dynamic space with lots of activity happening. And, I remember before all this shut down, you go into the office, you could literally feel the energy. And I do miss that. And actually sitting here right now talking about that, I get excited thinking about being able to experience that again. And so all those things are certainly things that I'm excited about.
Vince, it was awesome. Wish you a safe trip to see your dad. Enjoy the trip, and really thank you for spending all this time with us. It was such a pleasure to have you, and thanks for sharing all your stories with us.
Fantastic. Well, thank you for having me. I really enjoyed it.
If you enjoyed listening to this episode, it would mean so much to us if you could take a moment to share this show on LinkedIn. To learn more how Guru and his team can help optimize and grow your e-commerce business on Amazon and other retailers, visit commerceiq.ai. Thanks for listening.